The city of Los Angeles was gripped with fear as a brutal serial killer known as the Night Stalker terrorized its residents in the mid-1980s.
He had a dark heart and liked to see what scared people. The Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez.
His crimes were so heinous that they were often described as the work of a demon rather than a human being. But who was he? A brutal killer or an unfortunate victim of the situation? How did he evade the authorities for so long, and what led to his capture? In this video, we'll take a closer look at the life and crimes of Richard Ramirez and explore the psychology behind his actions. Join us as we delve into the darkest corners of his mind and attempt to unravel the mystery of one of the most notorious killers in American history. Richard Ramirez was born on February 29, 1960 in El Paso, Texas. Richard's childhood was marked by chaos and violence. With 4 siblings and an abusive father, he had a difficult upbringing. As a child, he was introverted and struggled academically, leading to a troubled path that would eventually make him infamous. However, his troubled youth was not the only thing that set him on a path towards darkness. He was strongly influenced by his cousin Miguel, a decorated Green Beret combat veteran who had already become a serial killer and rapist during his time in the Vietnam War. Richard was deeply affected by Miguel's graphic tales and Polaroid snapshots of Vietnamese women whom he had sexually assaulted, killed, and beheaded. Richard was fascinated by these stories and learned military skills such as stealth and hiding in the dark from his cousin. Richard tragically witnessed Miguel shoot and kill his wife during a domestic dispute. Rather than being traumatized, he was fascinated by the act. He became increasingly withdrawn and began using drugs frequently, eventually melding his sexual fantasies with graphic violence, including murder and mutilation. It wasn't long before Richard began to meld his burgeoning sexual fantasies with graphic violence. He got a job at a nearby Holiday Hotel, where he used his passkey to rob guests who were fast asleep. During his job, he sexually assaulted 2 children in the hotel's elevator. But when he tried to rape a woman in her own room and her husband caught him, he was fired from the job immediately. In 1982, at the age of 22, Richard moved to California and settled permanently. He started using cocaine around this time and became addicted to it. To finance his addiction, he resorted to thefts and burglaries. In 1981 and in 1984, he was arrested twice in Los Angeles for auto theft. During this time, he also started neglecting his personal hygiene. Richard's criminal rampage began with theft, but it quickly escalated to unthinkable violence. His first known murder was on June 28, 1984, when he killed 79-year-old Jenny Vincow during a burglary. Richard sexually assaulted and stabbed her to death, and this was only the beginning. Over the next few months, he continued to terrorize California, leaving a trail of victims in his wake. In March of 1985, he attacked Maria Hernandez, but she managed to escape. However, her roommate, Dale Okazaka, was not as lucky and Richard killed her. The same night, he also killed Victoria Yu. He was called the Valley Intruder by the media, but his murderous rampage was far from over. Richard Ramirez had a horrifying way of attacking his victims. He would always shoot the husband first, then savagely assault and stab the wife. In one brutal attack, he even gouged out a woman's eyes before killing her and then her husband. The police tried to stop him, but he continued to strike fear into the hearts of the community, taking lives of at least 12 more people over the next few months. The public's horror and interest was increased by the presence of devil horns in several of his attacks. The Los Angeles police and the FBI were determined to catch him, and the media pressure and descriptions from his surviving victims forced Richard to flee north to San Francisco in August 1985. There he took the lives of Peter and Barbara Pan on August 17th, marking a new chapter in his bloody reign. Richard's horrific crimes made him infamous, and he was called the Night Stalker by the press. His sprees of murder, rapes, and robberies had left California in a state of shock and fear. Ramirez's reign of terror finally came to an end on a summer night in 1985. The city of Los Angeles held its breath as news of the Night Stalker's latest whereabouts spread like wildfire. Every police officer, journalist, and citizen was on high alert, eager to bring an end to the killer's reign of terror. But it was a group of ordinary citizens who would ultimately take matters into their own hands. It was a scorching hot morning when Richard Ramirez arrived at a Tucson bus terminal completely oblivious to the fact that his face was plastered all over the news. Police officers were on high alert and were keeping an eye on the bus stations. Richard Ramirez's luck would soon run out. As he entered a convenience store in East Los Angeles, he was recognized by a group of elderly Hispanic women who screamed in terror at the sight of him. Realizing that he had been identified, Richard bolted out of the store and ran across the Santa Ana freeway. In his desperation, Richard tried to carjack a vehicle but was stopped by an angry resident, Faustino Pinon. He then attempted to take the car keys from Angelina de la Torre, but her husband, Manuel, intervened, striking Richard over the head with a fence post. A group of citizens quickly formed and chased Richard down the street, eventually capturing him and subjecting him to a brutal beating. When the police finally arrived, they found Richard severely injured and unarmed. They arrested him and took him to the Hollenbeck police station, while a growing crowd of hundreds of angry citizens looked on. The downfall of Richard Ramirez, one of the most infamous serial killers, was a shocking finale to his reign of terror. But it was the ordinary people, with their bravery and determination, who brought him to justice and put an end to the nightmare that had gripped the state for so long. On July 22, 1988, Richard Ramirez's trial started. The courtroom was tense as the jury filed in, their eyes fixated on the defendant's table where Richard Ramirez sat, looking almost relaxed. His cocky demeanor belied the gravity of the situation, the weight of the evidence against him. But as the judge read out the verdict, Ramirez's face twisted into a snarl of rage and frustration. He had been found guilty on all counts, and the sentence was death. As the trial dragged on, rumors swirled about Ramirez's behavior behind bars. Some said he was planning an escape, while others whispered that he had already managed to smuggle a gun into the courthouse. The security measures became more and more intense, with metal detectors and searches of everyone entering the building. But even with all of that, the shocking murder of a juror still managed to rock the trial to its core. The jurors were terrified, wondering if Richard had somehow set up the killing from his cell. The alternate who replaced the deceased juror was too scared to return to her home. But it was eventually revealed that the victim's boyfriend was responsible for her death, and Richard was not involved. Nonetheless, the fear in the courtroom was evident. The evidence against Richard was overwhelming. On September 20th, 1989, the jury returned a unanimous guilty verdict on 43 charges, including 13 counts of murder, 5 of attempted murder, 11 of sexual assault, and 14 of burglary. Finally, after years of waiting, justice was served. The same jury recommended the death penalty on 19 counts, and on November 7, 1989, Richard Ramirez was sentenced to death in the gas chamber. As he left the courtroom, Richard uttered his now infamous words, "Hey, big deal. Death will always come with the territory. I'll see you in Disneyland." But there would be no more thrills for Richard, no more terrorizing innocent victims. He was sent to San Quentin prison to await his fate, and justice was finally done. Despite his heinous crimes, Richard had a disturbing following of fans who sent him letters and visited him in prison. Among them was Doreen Lee Oy, who wrote him 75 letters and eventually married him in prison. However, after DNA evidence linked Richard to the rape and murder of a 9-year-old,
9-year-old May Linda Leung lived in an apartment a few blocks away. Police said May was at the building on April 10th.
the Oy ended their relationship. At the time of his death, Richard was engaged to a 23-year-old writer. Richard's attempt to appeal his convictions and death sentence were met with repeated disappointments. Despite his additional appeals that were still pending at the time of his death, his fate had already been sealed. Richard's health had already begun to deteriorate due to his struggles with chronic substance abuse and a chronic hepatitis C viral infection. His life came to an end on June 7, 2013, when he passed away from complications caused by B-cell lymphoma at Marine General Hospital in Green Bay, California. The man who had once instilled fear and terror in the hearts of many had finally met his end, leaving behind a legacy of horror and tragedy that will not soon be forgotten. Psychiatrist Michael H. Stone believes that Richard became a psychopath due to his experiences rather than being born with them. His personality disorder and childhood injuries may have led to his violent and sexually motivated behavior. Thank you for watching True Crime Prime. Kindly subscribe to our channel and remember to like, share, and comment.